The papers were already on the table when I walked in. Not hidden under a napkin, not tucked inside a menu. Just sitting there, in a manila folder, at the one empty seat. My seat. I knew it was mine because my mother had placed a small vase of white daisies next to it. She always does that when she wants something to feel like a gift. I stood in the doorway for a moment. The restaurant hummed around me, silverware clinked, someone laughed at the bar, and the smell of dry-aged beef and expensive candles filled the air. My older brother was already seated, his arms stretched across the back of the chair beside him like he owned the room. My sister-in-law was checking her phone. My father had his hands folded on the table the way he does in board meetings, or what I assumed board meetings look like, since I'd never been invited to one. Nobody looked up when I came in. I pulled out the chair, sat down, and moved the daisy vase 2 inches to the left. "You made it," my mother said, finally looking at me. She smiled the way she always smiles at me. Warm on the surface, relieved underneath. Like my showing up was a small miracle she hadn't been entirely sure would happen. "I made it," I said. I didn't touch the folder. Let me back up, because none of this will make sense without the part that came before it. And the part that came before it starts 26 years ago, in a 3-bedroom house in Tempe, Arizona, where I was born 11 months after my brother and promptly became the family afterthought. That's not bitterness talking. That's just the math of our household, my brother. I'll call him by what the rest of the family calls him, which is just my brother, because that's all he ever really was to me. A role, not a person, was the one who got the college fund conversations at dinner, the one whose baseball games my father drove 4 hours to watch, the one my mother called first when anything happened, good or bad, because in her mind, the family news cycle began with him. I was smart. I knew I was smart, the way you know the sky is blue. Not because anyone told you, but because you can see it. I taught myself to read at 4. I was doing my brother's algebra homework by the time I was 10, though he never told anyone that. In school, I got straight A's and then got a scholarship to a state school that my parents told people about exactly once, at Thanksgiving, before moving the conversation back to my brother's acceptance to a mid-tier private university that they were paying for in full. I didn't say anything. I was good at not saying anything. After college, I moved to Austin. I got a job at a small logistics software company, a place with 12 employees and folding tables for desks. Within 2 years, I was running product. Within 4, I'd helped take the company from $2 million in annual revenue to $19 million. Within 6, I'd left to start my own thing. I didn't tell my family any of that. I told them I had a job, and then I told them I was doing some consulting, which was vague enough to be true and unimpressive enough that they stopped asking. My mother asked once if I needed money. My brother asked once if I needed a reference. I said no to both. What I was actually doing was building a property data analytics platform. I know that doesn't sound exciting. That's the thing about the most lucrative ideas. They often don't sound exciting until someone writes a very large check for them. I spent 3 years building it with a co-founder I'd met at a conference in Denver, a woman named Adrienne, who was the best systems architect I'd ever worked with. We split the equity cleanly, 60% mine, 40% hers. We raised a seed round, then a Series A, then a Series B. We had enterprise clients in 17 states. We had a recurring revenue number that made investors sit up straighter. And then, 22 months ago, we sold the company. I'm not going to say the number out loud because I still haven't fully absorbed it. What I'll say is that after taxes, after paying out our team's equity, after Adrienne took her share, I walked away with more money than my father had made across his entire career, multiplied by a number I'd rather not say. I told exactly 3 people: my attorney, my financial advisor, and Adrienne. I did not tell my family. Here's what I told myself about why I didn't tell them. I wanted to protect the privacy of the deal. There were NDAs, there were earn-out clauses. It wasn't the right time. Here's the real reason. I had spent 31 years being the person in my family who didn't matter very much, and I was curious what would happen if I stayed that way a little longer. I wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long to find out. 8 months ago, my grandfather passed away. He was 84, sharp until the very end, and he left behind a will that surprised everyone, including me. He'd always said the lake house in Minnesota would go to the whole family. shared equally, maintained together, the kind of vague generational plan that sounds nice at Christmas and becomes a legal nightmare in probate. But the will wasn't vague. My grandfather had been specific. The lake house would pass to his 4 grandchildren in equal shares, 25% each to me, my brother, my cousin on my mother's side, and my cousin on my father's side. My brother called me the day after the will was read. "We need to talk about the house," he said. I said okay. Dad thinks it makes the most sense for me to manage it, since I'm local. My brother lives 40 minutes from the lake house. I live in Austin. My cousins live in Portland and Atlanta. Local in this context meant something specific. Manage it how? I asked. Just handle things. Maintenance. Rentals, if we do rentals. Decisions about upkeep. Someone needs to be the point person. Sure, I said. That makes sense. I did not say, and what does that have to do with my 25% ownership? I didn't say it because I already knew where this was going, and I wanted to let it get there on its own. 3 weeks later, my father called. "Your brother and I have been talking," he said, which is how most of the conversations that affect my life begin, and we think the cleanest solution is for you to transfer your share to him. You're in Texas, you're not going to use the property, and it would simplify things considerably. What would I get in return? I asked. A pause. Well, you'd be contributing to the family. I thanked him for calling and said I'd think about it. Then I called my attorney. What my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 months before my grandfather died, he had called me. Not my brother, not my cousins, me. We talked for almost 2 hours. He asked me about my work, and unlike everyone else in my family, he actually listened to the answers. When I explained what the company did, he said, "So you built something that helps people understand what their property is worth before they decide what to do with it." I said yes, basically. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Smart girl." He told me he was worried about the house, not the building itself, the situation. He knew what happened to family property when one person controlled it and the others didn't pay attention. He'd seen it in his own family, 1 generation back. He'd watched an uncle slowly push everyone else out, through paperwork and patience. "I'm not saying your brother would do that," he said. Then he paused. "I'm not saying he wouldn't." He asked if I'd be willing to be the executor of a codicil he was planning to add to the will, a specific instruction that required unanimous consent from all 4 grandchildren for any ownership transfer, refinancing, or major decision about the property. No single person could move without the others. I said yes. He added the codicil 2 months before he died. My brother didn't know about it. My father didn't know about it. Nobody knew except my grandfather, his attorney, and me. When my father suggested I transfer my share, I already knew it was impossible, but I let him think I was considering it. The dinner invitation came 6 weeks later. My mother texted me on a Tuesday, "We'd love to have you visit." Dad has a reservation at Whitmore's Saturday night. All of us. Whitmore's is a steakhouse in Phoenix, where my father goes when he wants to feel important. I'd been there twice before, once for my brother's law school graduation, once for my parents' anniversary. It's the kind of place that has leather menus and a sommelier who calls you by your last name after one visit. I flew in Saturday morning. I already knew what the dinner was for. My attorney had warned me that a formal transfer request was likely coming, that they'd probably try to make it feel like a family conversation rather than a legal one, and that I should let them make their pitch before saying anything. What I didn't expect was the folder. I looked at it while my mother poured water and my brother said something about traffic on the 10. The folder was manila, legal-sized, and I could see the tab on the edge had been labeled in my father's handwriting. My name. My full name, first and last, which my father only uses when he's trying to be official. I didn't open it. We ordered. My brother got the ribeye. My father got the fillet. My sister-in-law, who had been almost completely silent, ordered a salad and kept her eyes on the menu for longer than necessary. About 10 minutes into dinner, after the bread had come and the first glass of wine had been poured, my father set down his fork and said, "We should talk about the house." "Okay," I said. He laid it out the same way he had on the phone, but more polished this time. He'd clearly rehearsed it. Or maybe my brother had helped him. The argument was reasonable on its surface. Shared property creates shared liability. Someone needs to be in charge. It's more practical for that person to have full ownership, and I was the one most removed from it geographically. So we'd like you to consider signing over your share to your brother, he said. What would I receive in return? I asked again. Exact same words as on the phone. This time, my brother answered. We talked about a goodwill payment, he said. Something nominal, to make it clean. How nominal? My brother and my father exchanged a look. $1, my father said. Standard legal language. I picked up my wine glass, took a sip. Set it down. Open the folder, my brother said, nodding toward it. I opened it. It was a deed transfer. My name at the top, my brother's name below it. 25% ownership of the lake house property, transferred for a consideration of $1 and other good and valuable consideration. There were 2 signature lines at the bottom. Mine was highlighted in yellow. I read it twice. Then I closed it. I can't sign this, I said. My father's expression shifted, not angry yet, just recalibrating. Why not? Because Grandpa added a codicil to his will that requires unanimous consent from all 4 grandchildren for any ownership transfer. I'd need my cousin's signatures before we could even have this conversation legally. And honestly, I don't think they'd agree. The table went quiet in the specific way tables go quiet when someone says something that changes the shape of a room. What codicil? My brother said. The one he filed 2 months before he died. His attorney has the original. I have a copy. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. I didn't slide it across the table dramatically. I just set it down flat, the way you'd set down a receipt. I've known about this since before he passed. I didn't bring it up sooner because I wanted to see how this conversation would go. My father picked up the paper. He read it. His jaw tightened. Why would he do this? He said, and I could hear in his voice that he already suspected the answer. Because he knew what you'd do, I said. That wasn't kind. I knew it wasn't kind when I said it, but I'd spent a long time choosing kindness and I wanted to try the alternative, just once, and see how it felt. What happened next wasn't dramatic in the way you might picture. Nobody threw anything. Nobody cried. My mother got very quiet and started moving her bread around her plate. My sister-in-law excused herself to the restroom, and I don't think it was a coincidence that she stayed gone for 12 minutes. My brother said, I think you're being deliberately obstructive. I said, I think you're trying to take something that belongs to me for $1. My father said, that's not what this is. I said, okay. There's a specific kind of conversation where one person keeps insisting something isn't what it obviously is, and the other person just has to decide how long they're willing to go in circles. I had made my decision about that before I sat down. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. I'm happy to have a real conversation about the property with all 4 of us and a mediator. I think Grandpa's codicil was actually smart. It means none of us can get pushed out without everyone agreeing. That protects your share too, I added, looking at my brother, in case you ever end up being the one who someone wants to cut out. He didn't have an answer for that. The folder sat between us for the rest of dinner, unopened. We finished our meals in a way that was technically civil. The sommelier came and went. Dessert was offered and declined. When the check came, my father reached for it automatically, the way he always does, and for some reason that gesture, that small automatic thing, made something pull in my chest. I've got it, I said. You don't have to, I know. I put my card down. I've got it. 3 weeks after that dinner, I told my mother the truth. Not all of it, just enough. I told her the company I'd built had done well, that I wasn't the person they needed to worry about, that I was fine. More than fine. She was quiet for a long time on the phone. Why didn't you tell us? She finally asked. I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because I wanted to know if you'd treat me the same either way, I said. And now I know. She started to cry a little, not dramatically, just the soft kind of crying that happens when someone realizes something they can't unrealize. I didn't try to fix it. I just let her feel it. I love you, she said. I know you do, I said. I love you too. That part was true. It was also complicated in the way that most true things are. The lake house matter was resolved 4 months later. With all 4 grandchildren in the Zoom call, with 2 attorneys present, we agreed on a property management structure that divided responsibilities and costs equally, with no single person holding unilateral authority. My brother agreed to handle local maintenance calls. I agreed to take point on financials and taxes, since that happens to be an area I have some experience in. My father asked on that call if I would be interested in getting back to Arizona more often. I said I'd try. My cousin in Atlanta asked what I'd been doing professionally. I gave the short version. There was a pause on the call. Then she said, "Wait, that was your company?" I said yes. "I read about that acquisition," she said. "That was a huge deal." "Yeah," I said. "It was." My brother didn't say anything, but I heard him exhale. That particular exhale that means someone is doing the math in their head and arriving at a number they weren't prepared for. I didn't help him with the math. I didn't need to. There's a version of this story where I'm angrier, where I march into that dinner with documentation and receipts and make everyone feel exactly how small they made me feel. I understand that version. I've thought about it plenty. But here's the thing about being underestimated for a long time: it gives you patience. It gives you the ability to wait, to watch, to let people show you who they are at their own pace. And it gives you a very clear picture of what you're working with, which turns out to be more useful than winning any particular argument. My grandfather saw that in me. I didn't know he saw it until he called me that afternoon, but I think he'd seen it for years. He left me something more valuable than a percentage of a lake house. He left me a lesson about how power works, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that holds. I have the codicil framed in my office now, not to be smug about it, just because when I look at it, I think of that 2-hour phone call, and the way he said "smart girl," and the way that felt different from every other compliment I'd ever gotten, because he said it the way you'd say it about someone who'd already proven it. I keep the white daisy my mother had put on the table that night too. She pressed it into a napkin before we left, like she always does with flowers she likes, and she slipped it into my jacket pocket without saying anything. I found it on the plane home. I don't know exactly what she meant by it, but I kept it anyway. I've thought a lot about what my grandfather actually gave me that afternoon on the phone. Not the codicil, though that mattered. Not the legal protection, though that mattered too. What he gave me was the experience of being truly seen by someone who had no reason to perform it. He wasn't trying to make me feel better. He wasn't compensating for years of not paying attention. He just looked at what I'd built, understood it, and said "smart girl" the way you'd say it about someone who'd already proven it 100 times over, and you were simply the last one to say it out loud. That's a rare thing, and I don't think it happens by accident. I think people who develop real patience, not the passive kind, not the kind that's just fear wearing a quieter coat, but the kind that comes from actually trusting yourself, tend to attract a certain quality of recognition. Not always, not from everyone, but from the people who are paying attention to the right things. My grandfather was paying attention for a long time before he called me. I just didn't know it. What I've come to understand about those years of being the overlooked one is that they weren't wasted. Every dinner where I wasn't asked about my work, every holiday where the conversation bent automatically toward my brother, every phone call that started with my father assuming I needed something, all of it was information. It told me exactly what assumptions people were operating under, which meant I knew exactly what they weren't prepared for. That's not nothing. That's actually an enormous advantage if you're patient enough to hold it. The hard part isn't the patience. The hard part is not letting the years of being underestimated make you small on the inside, even when you're performing small on the outside. There's a version of staying quiet that slowly hollows you out, where you stop believing in your own value because nobody around you is reflecting it back. I got close to that version a few times. I won't pretend otherwise. What pulled me back every time was the work itself. Adrian and I would be in the office at midnight debugging something that wasn't working, and the problem would crack open, and I would feel something so clear and certain in my chest that no family dinner could touch it. That feeling was mine. Nobody gave it to me, and nobody could take it. I think that's the thing I'd want someone to take from this, if they're in the middle of their own version of it right now. The people who underestimate you are not authorities on your value. They are just people who haven't been paying attention, and their inattention, as painful as it is, says nothing definitive about you. What says something definitive about you is what you do in the time they're not watching. My brother will manage the maintenance calls at the lake house. I'll handle the finances. We'll be civil at holidays. My mother will probably keep putting daisies at my seat, and I'll probably keep finding them in my jacket pocket on the plane home. None of it is fully resolved. Most things aren't. But I closed that folder. I set down the codicil, and I picked up the check. That's enough.